And now he's going to tell us one of his experiences, his experimentation that will allow us to get our students in contact and develop their intercultural communication. It is something that may inspire you for further activities using more digital tools. Let's listen to what he has to tell us.
Thank you very much, Alessandra, and thank you all for coming and joining us here in this little seminar. The seminar is based on the Erasmus project, TeCoLa. You can visit it later on the website. The project, TeCoLa, focuses on helping foreign language students develop their intercultural communicative competence by involving them in online environments such as, well, eTwinning, such as the TeCoLa Virtual World, such as Big Blue Button video conferencing, or it could be Skype, or the Padlet digital wall. Together in this seminar, we will explore the tools and tasks we have developed in TeCoLa, and more importantly, how these tools and tasks can be used in eTwinning projects. Now, this is the program. We have 4 sections. First, a few words on guiding assumptions and goals, then a stroll through the TeCoLa Virtual World. Afterwards, a few words again on multimodality and differentiation. And finally, TeCoLa activities within eTwinning projects. And in between these sections, there's over to you, where you can add your comments and questions. And Alessandra has uploaded a Google Docs file, that is, has created a Google Docs file and has sent you the link in the chat where you can, after each section or while you are listening, enter your questions and comments. And then in the pauses between the sections, I will then try to reply. So first, guiding assumptions and goals. It all begins with the learning objectives that are specified in our school curricula. The focus is on communicative competence, even on intercultural communicative competence. But despite all these years, even decades of a focus on communicative language teaching, there is still a discrepancy between the vision and the reality. What can you do as a teacher in a regular classroom to help your students develop communicative and intercultural communicative competence? There are many things you can do, but there are also serious limitations. Some pedagogues would talk about authenticity, which is needed beyond the classroom. Beyond a classroom where you can only talk to your neighbors, to your classmates, with whom you share maybe the same native language, or at least the same main language. That is authenticity beyond the classroom. Some researchers and pedagogues even talk about language learning in the wild. So as if we were out there in a truly authentic environment. Now, one possibility is, of course, traveling, going places. But another possibility today with modern technology involves online intercultural exchanges through eTwinning, through video communication, through collaborative creation, so something we are doing now here with Google Docs, or Padlet. In our TeCoLa project, we put a special focus, in addition to video conferencing and Padlet, we put a special focus on virtual world activities, our TeCoLa Virtual World, in which learners and teachers are represented by an avatar, can walk around as an avatar and talk to each other and write in a chat and communicate and exchange things and can do things together. That is the technological enhancement we aim to contribute to online intercultural exchanges. A pedagogical enhancement, we aim to contribute concerns using one's target language, be it English or German or Spanish or Italian, using one's target language as a pedagogical lingua franca. That means we put students from different countries in contact with each other who share the same target language, maybe Italian, students from France and Germany both learning Italian, and we put them together in this online medium so that they can communicate with each other and collaborate with each other. This pedagogical lingua franca condition is very interesting. Many teachers are afraid that maybe their students would be less correct, and maybe for this reason they wouldn't want this. What we noticed is that our students, they have their requirements. They want to meet when they communicate. Being correct is one of them, but being understood, understanding the other person, being able to convey what one wants to convey, being able to establish rapport is also very important. And sometimes in an authentic communicative context, these requirements become temporarily more important than correctness. Learners feel very much in the same boat when they are sharing the same non-native speaker target language. They tend to feel more comfortable. They tend to develop learner agency. They tend to develop a certain degree of emancipation in their second language. So this is what we have in mind here as assumptions and goals, starting from objectives, intercultural communicative competence development, to creating opportunities for authentic or near authentic communication with the help of online intercultural exchanges, with the help specifically of virtual world exchanges, and with a focus on a pedagogical lingua franca approach. And this is where we have a first opportunity for you to add your comments and questions. Is intercultural communicative competence development an important objective for you as a foreign language teacher? Are you satisfied with what you are able to do in the regular classroom? Do you see the pedagogical potential of online communication and collaboration? Maybe, do you have any experiences in this area to share with us? Should students use their target language as a pedagogical lingua franca? Do you feel comfortable with this as a teacher? So over to you. Mm. So we have one comment which seems to be very positive. I firmly believe in the possibilities of teaching in the wild virtual world. So luckily we have some more information on this coming up. Mm-hmm. And I mean, being eTwinning teachers, I would expect that this is kind of natural for you, not necessarily for other teachers. In our project, we encountered many teachers whose first preference would have been for a tandem constellation. That is, where their students communicate with native speaker students at the other end, which is kind of difficult to organize, of course, as you would have matching learners at the other end, and there aren't just not that many English native speakers who are also learning, say, German or Italian or French, maybe Spanish or Turkish. So there's an imbalance. And this imbalance, in many cases, helped us to convince teachers to go for a pedagogical lingua franca approach instead, much easier to organize. And when they observed their students and saw how they were communicating, they became convinced of the validity of this approach. Yes, and this is, of course, very interesting that students these days, they visit sites and blogs, and so they are in Facebook and are in touch internationally anyways. More easily, I would assume, in English. So with other target languages, it might be more difficult. Okay. So all this, these comments seem to confer this approach, and I think this is why you're here. Communication competences are the most important thing in foreign language teaching. And of course, eTwinning projects help in this respect. And what we are going to talk about here today is not in competition with eTwinning projects, but rather as an addition. So that
I would add that not only the communicative competences are developed, but what is important most of everything we said are the intercultural communication competences. That is a real focus in eTwinning. Getting in touch with other people and using one language as a lingua franca, understanding different cultures.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and understanding different cultures and learning to move and to communicate across cultural and language boundaries is becoming more and more important in our lives. Okay, let's move on to the next section, and that is now about the TeCoLa Virtual World. Maybe first a few pictures of what you find there. It's the virtual world, as those of you who know Second Life, it's similar to Second Life, but it's a closed environment, which is of course important for the school context. It's a safe, in this respect, a safe environment, and we have certain areas. So here you have the welcome area where people actually start when they enter the environment. You have Chatterdale, which is a town in an English style where you can have English speaking activities. You have a town in a French style, Chez Amélie Café, and of course other houses and streets and places and marketplaces with a focus on French. And you have Valencia, Spanish, and Valencia Beach, which is actually an area where we have many of our online project meetings, so where project partners are lying around here on these floating mats and discussing serious things. We have a German area, Saarburg, and we have other areas like Arcadia or Acadia Castle for exploring how to move around, Asterix Village. We have a sandbox area, very important, where teachers can try out things and practice things. So this is just to give you a rough overview. In these environments, we use what we call learning stations, that is boards. Here you can see in this picture, you can see these boards here. Learning stations with 2 or 3 boards in a certain TeCoLa Virtual World environment. And on these boards, on these learning station boards, users, participants, the learners find the task content and instructions in the form of text and pictures, video clips, web pages, questions and problems. For instance, here we have a text with a picture. This is a video actually, and they stand in front of these boards. They move from learning station to learning station and then do what they are supposed to do. Learning paths connect several learning stations in a fixed thematic sequence. We will see more examples of this. Okay, so this is very important to, which makes the virtual environment very flexible, because otherwise, I mean, of course, it wouldn't be possible to change the environments all the time and adapt them to certain thematic learning activities. But what we can do is that we combine the more static environment in which learners can move around, that we combine this with learning stations for more targeted tasks. How do students communicate and interact in this environment? Well, as I said before, students are represented as avatars. So here, these are avatars sitting here around this little table. And they meet as avatars in pairs or small groups. So this is also something which we put in the foreground, that very much like in real life, where much of our communication goes on in pairs or in small groups, we put a special focus on this kind of communicative activity in front of learning station boards, where the students can then read the boards, they can talk and write. They have a chat for writing and communicate with each other. So they read what is on the board. This is a learning station about breakfast. What do you have for breakfast? And first they are asked to describe the breakfast in the 2 pictures, and then they are invited to talk about their breakfast habits and customs at home and discuss it. So they follow instructions on the boards, they talk about the issues addressed, and they maybe collaborate to solve certain problems. While they are talking about certain issues specified on the board, they may take notes, either offline on a notepad next to their laptop, or on an online collaborative worksheet, like you are doing now in the Google Docs file. They may also be told to create things together using online tools like Google Docs, Google Slides, or drawings. That is, to create a presentation, to write a summary of their discussion and present it later in class. This is very important, an important aspect, this presenting later in class. These online activities are meant to be embedded in a blended learning environment. So where preparation takes place in the classroom and follow-up activities take place in the classroom. There's also in our virtual world the possibility of having a quiz station which enables student teams to discuss and check what they have learned. So the students sit here on these chairs and then they have to answer questions, and if they get it right, their chair moves up a notch, and then, well, some are faster than others. Or they could do it team by team and then look at the total scores and compare the different teams. What is always important for us is to design these activities in such a way that it is not possible to just do them and get things right, but that they trigger communication, communicative exchange, discussions, teamwork, all these things. Okay, another over to you phase. Do you see a value in using learning stations and paths, like here in the TeCoLa Virtual World? If yes, why? If not, why not? Yes, as someone says, I love the idea of a virtual world where the students can be someone else with their avatar. Well, it's actually in our environment, they could be someone else entirely, but in our activities, they are usually in the environment with their own names, so you know who is who. But they, of course, create their avatars. The way they dress, and the body shapes and these things, and we notice that some students take a particular interest in sort of shaping their avatars in a certain way. What is kind of interesting in this connection is that other than in a video conference, students can kind of hide behind their avatar. So like now you see my facial expression, and if we were in a full-blown video conference, I would be able to see you. And sometimes, well, people don't feel familiar with this. And we notice that in some cases, some students, they feel more comfortable in the virtual world for this reason. Or maybe initially, and once after they know each other better, then they might also feel comfortable in a video conference. But this is an interesting aspect, that in the virtual world you can kind of hide behind the avatar. And the other point is that it gives a certain feeling of being there in this environment. That is kind of interesting. I also did it with my students in kind of online, well, seminars where we sat around a table, and after a while you forget that you are sitting around a table in this virtual environment. I mean, you recognize the voices, you see the names, and that's kind of interesting. Okay, let me see. What do we have here? So try to make the students move around and learn.
I was reading what attendees have written here, and one of them said she thinks, or he, it may be useful and convenient as a means of learning, but it frightens her or him a bit. What I don't understand, what is the fright for? Why is he or she afraid of? Okay, now they're writing. It is exactly this feeling of the true thing that frightens me. I don't understand.
Oh.
What is the fear? You may lose. You feel of time passing.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you move around and then no. I mean, my impression from our experience is that the danger is not so much that you forget that behind the avatars are real people, but it's rather that you forget that in the foreground are these avatars, so you become more focused on the real people behind them. I mean, that is my personal experience also with my students, and this is how things work for the students we have been in.
I understand what the teacher says.
But this is maybe something.
I understand what the teacher says now, because many students don't behave differently when they are behind a screen. But it depends on the amount of time they spend using social media. That is a general sense. At school, the guidance of the teacher is essential. At home, the guidance of parents as well. So it is only a control and a guidance that can avoid problems of that kind. We can try to get the best of everything.
Yeah, I think this point here is very interesting because our environment here is not meant as a free, open social space where they meet, like in Facebook and where you might meet, I don't know, unknown and funny people. It's always you go there by appointment for doing certain things. Yeah, so it's entirely different in this respect from being in other social environments. So it's just that we take advantage of this virtual environment to engage learners in, well, maybe more, that is our hope, more authentic tasks, to increase the perceived authenticity of the activities instead of well, talking to your next to your classmate. But it's not like an open, anonymous social space. I mean, I would see this danger as well, and I would agree. But that's different. Later we will see more of task and task activities, and then maybe we can bring this back. Yes, this I can imagine it's a way to have very shy students expressing themselves. That's indeed the point. I mean, or one of the points. In some cases where students say yes, they did both. They first met their partner in Big Blue Button, which is our video conferencing platform, so similar here to Adobe Connect. And afterwards they met, I mean, a few days later or weeks later, they met in the TeCoLa Virtual World, and several of them told us, yes, they felt more comfortable in the virtual world. And that has a lot to do with feeling shy, with maybe being able to focus more on what you want to say, kind of looking inside, instead of controlling your picture, your video picture, and maybe not being happy how you look.
There is a question on how long will it take to have the station. No, it is inside the chat. How long will it take to go on through?
Well, that depends. That depends on the stations. I mean, it's usually we have stations where longer, more complex stations, which lasts maybe for 30 minutes or so. But that depends first on how complex the station or learning path is. So it entirely depends on you as a teacher. So you can have one learning station with one board, and on this board, maybe like the breakfast, just a picture and a little bit of information and a question, and then they discuss it. And so it's a very simple one. And then it depends on how engaged the students become. So some students, obviously, I mean, they just exchange a few remarks and then they are done with the task. And others, they go on and on and on. I mean, this is okay. And this is, again, something you as a teacher can and need to control. So this is where preparation is necessary, and the task specification, the instructions are necessary, follow-up activities are necessary, so that, I mean, if you like, a pedagogical drawback is that normally you as a teacher are not around when pupils meet here in front of the learning station. You could, but that would and maybe change the authenticity of the activity. So what you want is a certain outcome, something they have to present in class so that you see that the activity had the desired pedagogical effect. But it actually all depends on how you design it. So in this respect, it's very open. And later we will have a look at a few activities and tasks. And I would be very much interested in how you see this. Okay, let's move on. Oh, well, yeah, we have covered this in a way, right? Do you think interacting might increase your students' task engagement? So I saw something, a remark concerning motivation. And actually, this is something we found, that it, for many students, not for all. It's always horses for courses, so you cannot generalize this across the board. And it's also something which I will bring up later. It's also interesting to bring up this issue of diversification and learner differentiation, and how different tools can be used for different purposes. But before we get there, let's first bring up another, for you, important, as a teacher, important aspect. And that is that teachers, well, and to a certain extent their students, can create their own learning station boards. So this is essential. And the way you do this, so first of all, boards are kind of, they contain or present multimedia content. That is, content that exists of a text, pictures, there could be a video, as I said. So in this case, what do you have for breakfast? Pictures. Describe the breakfast in the two pictures. Then talk about the following questions. In which countries would these breakfasts be served? What do you have for breakfast in your own country? What is your favorite breakfast dish? Because this could be one learning station. Very simple task, maybe even a warm-up task. Okay, but you could have more serious content here, like waste disposal, recycling, these things. So we have tasks going in this direction, and so covering this topic. And it's important that you, as a teacher, you can create these things. Why? Because this content here has been created as an online document using Google Docs or Google Slides or Google Drawings. And these online documents can, of course, be collaboratively developed and collaboratively adapted and changed, like similar to the Google Docs we are using here now. So everyone can write there and add their comments or change things. And we have an additional tool I will just mention here, and that is the so-called TeCoLa Gamify authoring tools. This is where you can list and manage your online documents, and then can project them onto learning station boards. But you create them here as online documents, and these online documents are then projected onto the station boards. And that is how authoring or editing of boards is possible. Do you see this need of creating tasks in the TeCoLa Virtual World? I mean, in my experience, it's essential. If you don't have it, I mean, I've been involved for many years, decades even, in teacher education. And in the 90s, we worked on multimedia content development, and we created beautiful tasks. And whenever we presented them to teachers, they said, oh, they are beautiful tasks, but we want something different. Yes, so this is essential. As a teacher, you always need something, you want something that fits certain purposes and certain requirements. And so you always need to be able to adapt, to change, to create new content, maybe on the basis of certain models and so forth. So in this respect, editing is very important. Yes.
About if all the class of 30 people can take part in TeCoLa at the same time.
Theoretically, yes, but I mean, it wouldn't be practical. For certain, we have some warm-up activities where the entire group of 20 or 30 pupils meet together in the virtual environment, but you can easily imagine how they move around and what happens and how difficult it is to to control them. And but it can be an interesting warm-up activity because they can write in the chat and say hello and stuff like that. So simple things, just as a warm-up. So this would work. And but as a more say complex task, even like a simple breakfast discussion, no, I wouldn't say you could. I would never do it with a large group. So I would always do it with smaller groups, and you can have your students separated in different groups and spread them all over the environment in different places where they all do maybe the same task or similar tasks. So that is possible, but not say all 30 around the same learning station. You wouldn't do this in the classroom either. I mean, where you make use of this pedagogical concept of learning station. So it's I think group activities is very much in the foreground here.
Maybe one person would be the avatar and the other a group collaborating. Groups, different groups with one avatar.
They are
so
all
that
avatars. They are all avatars. I mean, you are only what we tried a few years ago. We tried to involve the entire class by having say 4 as up with their avatars in the virtual world in a computer room, and the rest of the class was in the background kind of giving advice and so forth. It didn't work. It didn't work. And also because it's very difficult then to sound-wise to distinguish between who is talking and these things. And they were making all kinds of noise and distractions. And so this is indeed something which brings up an interesting, important issue. I mean, some of our activities are asynchronous, using Padlet, and that can be easily done during classroom hours. And you do it at your own classroom hour, and then the other class fits in their posts during their classroom hours. If you involve your students in synchronous learning activities, like here, speaking in particular, well, it's very, very difficult to find a partner class with precisely the same class hours. It's you may find some, but I mean it's very rare. It's very difficult. So what we did here, I mean, now the group I am working with within TeCoLa, we put a very strong focus on doing things from home or on the school premises outside class hours. So providing there are computer facilities and so forth, but not sort of shepherding the entire group to the computer room and then working with 20 or 30 students in the computer lab. That usually does not work, and it would be too heavy for the network. I mean, with talking. Yeah. So this is very much a preference we have, involving students from home. And we have the results we got are very positive, very encouraging. At the same time, of course, we are fully aware that in some cases we have schools that have the policy of no homework, so everything should take place within school, not necessarily during class hours. But that would, of course, also be a possibility for individual work, providing the facilities are there, computer facilities. Do we have other questions here, Alessandra? What is the effectiveness? Yes.
Yes, there is one by Valentina Gataska, sorry, says, what is the effectiveness of such activities and how do we measure it?
In terms of facilitating more authentic communication, it is very, very effective. And in this case, I would say we don't measure it. I mean, we record the sessions and we look at what is going on. And when you see that the students are talking for 30 minutes and 40 minutes, and they are moving on beyond the given topic, that is, say, breakfast, and then they continue talking about other things. And in one case, for instance, just to give you an example, two girls were talking about fashion. That was with German as a target language. And then they were talking about how long their skirts were supposed to be in school. And then one of them, she had problems describing it, so she stood on a chair to show, in that case it was a video conference, to show how long it was. So it's moving into a mode of communication which is close to, well, what people are doing in everyday communication. But like in everyday communication, you have, of course, students who are more talkative than others, who are more shy than others, and so forth. And this then requires a pedagogical structuring through the task content, the task material, and the task instructions. And in terms of, I think I saw something similar here, just in the chat. We also rely for our assessment. We also rely very much on something we call perceived success and learner or speaker satisfaction. So one thing is to look at what students are doing from the outside, that is through my eyes as a teacher, which is of course important and essential in particular for certain purposes, but it's also highly interesting to look at success and satisfaction through the eyes and perception of the learners themselves. So to learn more about what is important for them and why do they judge a certain performance as successful or not. And then pick these things up in the classroom and help them to, well, to learn. Learning to learn is also a very essential part for this. Okay, but I think we need to move on. I will go through the chat later. I think it will be all in the recording, and then maybe we can pick up things in a group. Alessandra can set up
Yes.
for further discussions. Yeah, which topics and activities would you be interested in? I mean, it could be the whole range from more culturally related things to more like if you are involved in CLIL, that is content and language integrated learning, that is bilingual classroom. So it could be anything. It's in particular because of the authoring function. It's yeah, very open and flexible. Maybe we can come back to this when we take a brief look at the end. Yeah, your students like eTwinning. Yeah, right. I mean, for students, it's yeah, it's like a breakout activity, right? Okay, let's see. I mentioned differentiation, learner differentiation. Let's have a quick look here at what we have available. The focus for us here today is on learning stations in the TeCoLa Virtual World. As I said, we also work with video communication in Big Blue Button or Skype. We use Big Blue Button in particular in Germany. We wouldn't be allowed to use Skype in school because it's not on a European server. So there's a strict policy in most of our educational departments, which is a pity, but it's a fact. We also use Padlet, a digital wall, so where you can post things, written and audio and video posts. Now, in this case, the virtual world and Big Blue Button or Skype, this enables you to engage your students in synchronous communicative collaboration. That is, they are there in the environment at the same time. And as I said before, we put a strong focus on doing this outside class hours, which can be on school premises, but also from home, depending on technological available infrastructures. Now, in the virtual world, you have communication through avatars. In the video conference, you have communication in a face-to-face mode. In Padlet, you have asynchronous communicative collaboration, which can be during class hours or outside class hours. Written, spoken, or video posts combined with pictures or web links. It can also be made synchronous. So if they are present at the same time, then you can see, like us now in Google Docs, it's kind of synchronous. You can write there, I read what you write, and I can add my comment. But the big advantage here is that Padlet can be used asynchronously. And as you can clearly see, there is a difference here in these tools in terms of possibilities, what you can do with them, also what you have to do. And this allows for different pedagogical affordances. So on the whole, across all three environments, we have the possibility to increase our students' written and spoken communicative productions. And that is very, very important as such. Because in the end, the success of learning a foreign language, becoming communicatively more proficient, very, very much depends not on input, but on output processing. That is, I as a learner need to do things, need to be able to write, need to be able to speak. And in particular, speaking this is where the regular classroom has some shortcomings. Now, you can also use these tool environments for scaffolding and guiding students towards more learner autonomy. So we noticed in some cases where, in this case it was a vocational school, where the students were not that well advanced in English and they didn't feel comfortable with synchronous communication. So we choose Padlet, and they work in a more controlled environment together with their teacher who is around and can help, and they create great things. But they have more time for writing something, for recording something, and before they post it, they can re-record it and re-record it until they like it, and then they post it there. And then the other students, their partner students, reply to this. Okay, and then they can compare and maybe discuss things again in Padlet or in a forum. We also use Moodle and Moodle forum and things. We also noticed, and we mentioned this before, that some students might be, well, a bit shy to present themselves in a video environment, and they might prefer hiding behind an avatar. Or before they talk, it might be important for them to first write in a Padlet or in a chat, in a text chat. So you can scaffold things in a certain way and guide students slowly towards more learner autonomy. And you can do it differently, for not in the same way for the entire class, but for different and individual learners differently. So there are some interesting options for learner differentiation, both with regard to say, certain communication preferences, which is where shyness would come in, but also with regard to proficiency levels, and to use the tools differentially to build things up in such a way that you can guide your students to where you want them to go. So here again, we have a few questions. I mean, do you differentiate in your own teaching between students with different learning abilities, learning interests, or learning needs? Do you have to? Is this an issue? Do you think online environments like the virtual world or Big Blue Button, Skype, or Padlet, or maybe Moodle forum and Moodle chat might help to differentiate? Yeah, I'm strongly convinced of it. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just in general, the richer the pedagogical environment is, in terms of supporting activities, that is more or less autonomous activities, the richer it is for differentiation. Yeah, I differentiate between students with different abilities, right? So this is, yeah, wiki spaces. This is also a very, very interesting environment, and which we used in previous projects a lot. Yeah. Yeah, and Padlet, I don't know how many of you use Padlet within eTwinning. I mean, you have something similar. So someone mentioned, is it the Titan Pad, which is similar to
It's a wiki. It's a way of writing collaboratively.
Oh, that's a wiki. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, in Twin Spaces, you have something similar to like a digital wall, right, where people can post
Padlet
things.
is more motivating. It's colored. It's multi-modal. You can
Yeah,
use videos,
yeah,
photos, and so
yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting. I like it a lot, and now our vocational school students, they just today some activities came in, and they created wonderful Padlet pages. And but again, in groups, so they're organized in groups, and then the groups can compare and then maybe compete. So you can add this element of gamification, and then always pick things up and discuss things in the classroom. I think that is always very, very important. So using all this, but I mean, I think this is just carrying owls to Athens for you. Using all this, all these online activities only work best when they are firmly pedagogically integrated with what you're doing in the
You
classroom.
said something interesting about
Okay.
differentiation and autonomy. What we aim at is our students being autonomous. And differentiation is important because it lowers filters, emotional filters. That is, they don't feel incompetence because they're doing the path we have decided for them and not for the other student. So differentiation helps to improve.
Yes. Okay. So here we have some comments coming in the chat. Okay. Yeah, well, I'll have a look later. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, differentiation and understanding the meaning of differentiation, I think all this is, of course, very important. I mean, it's there's a lot of well, conceptual development and pedagogical development needed here. And unfortunately, my experience is that teachers are very much left alone with this, and more often than not, there are just too many teaching hours and too little space, too little room for focusing on these pedagogical issues. Regarding learner autonomy, there was something I wanted to add. It's that sometimes learner autonomy is seen as something kind of static, so learners are autonomous or are not autonomous. But of course, I think you all agree that it's a process, and it's always, when you look at various educational phases, I mean, we are not born autonomous. We are not autonomous at all when we are born, but after a certain number of years, a certain educational maturational process, we should be autonomous, that is, move on our own feet. And when you look at school, at the beginning, learners are not autonomous. At the end of school, they should be able to continue on their own feet. So it's always a process. And it's a process that is pedagogically accompanied and needs to be pedagogically accompanied and guided. I think this is very essential. And in this respect, differentiation is very important, and not only because well, people have a different kind of dispositions and preferences, but they also have different learning styles and different learning speeds. And so here I see a great potential for these online environments to create some pedagogical added value. Okay. Develop things skills individually, yes. Okay. Now, let's have a quick look at some of the tasks. So these are just pictures now. When you go to tecola.eu and then go to TeCoLa resources, and under resources you find tasks. We have tasks for English and Spanish, German, and French. Most of them are for English. And some of the tasks, they concern activities in the TeCoLa Virtual World. Here you recognize breakfast. It's a learning station task. Here, what happens to the things we throw away? This is a learning pass, where boards are created and organized here around this little place. So they walk from board to board, they watch a video, they answer questions, and they discuss issues actually at the end, and sitting down here trying to find solutions for our waste problem. And just before Christmas, we had several exchanges between Dutch and German students learning English in this environment, and it was highly successful. These were more advanced students. Here, a video chat, an intercultural exchange about carnival traditions, healthy living, creating a presentation with the help of Google Slides, a Padlet, information about myself. And here, well, you may know, well, of course, you know Snakes and Letters, this universal game. So we have a Snakes and Letters game in the TeCoLa Virtual World, where students then can move from around, and then in this case they have to discuss, answer and discuss questions about well, their daily routines and what they like, movies they prefer, and things like that. Maybe at the end I can share my screen and take you there, but I think you went there anyway, so I can't see it. So go to TeCoLa.eu and then TeCoLa resources, and this is the tasks task section, and then you have also a section which I mentioned before, which we are now building up, guides, and we have a few guides here on doing things in the learning with learning stations and doing things in the TeCoLa Virtual World, but also guides concerning the tools. Well, now this kind of final question, TeCoLa activities within eTwinning. How? I think this is very easy and straightforward. It's just by embedding and pedagogically integrating the TeCoLa Virtual World, Big Blue Button or Padlet within your twin space. And why would you do it? Well, with regard to the TeCoLa Virtual World, it's kind of obvious. I mean, this kind of virtual world environment is not available within eTwinning, so you could add it. Big Blue Button, you may say, well, yes, we have Adobe Connect, but in our case with Big Blue Button, we have the possibility of setting up as many Big Blue Button rooms as we want. So for pairs of students or small groups of students, which is very important for having a kind of communicative privacy and for them to becoming fully engaged in the environment. So it's more for individualization purposes. Padlet, well, you have something similar, but as Alessandra said, Padlet offers more functionality. And eTwinning or twin spaces are wonderful environments to support your intercultural exchanges, and you have a whole range of tools available, and well, it's also easy to blend in other tools which might be important for your tasks. And why? Well, as I just said, to support individualized communication in pairs or small groups. For me, this would be very, very important. And to enable students to communicate in kind of gamified virtual world environments. I added a few references here if you are interested. Alexandra, how can we do this? Can we make this presentation available somehow later? Of course we can, in connection with the group you plan to set up, right? I think I can't understand you.
The possibility of sharing the recording of this meeting, so they may have a look at it and stop the place where your is mentioned, your books or references are mentioned.
Okay. So then the references are in the recording as well. And well, as I said before, the idea is to set up an eTwinning group for this topic area, and you are invited to join. And otherwise, please, you're welcome to send me an email, to
May,
and I can send you
may I say
things.
something?
Let me see. So here
I
you
would
see
add something that is very important. When we usually teach a foreign language, not only English, we have students, as I was saying, quote before, our students are afraid of not being at the level of a mother tongue speaker. So using foreign languages in a lingua franca perspective, pedagogical perspective, may be very useful to enhance communicative competence, as the students don't feel as if they were incompetent with a mother tongue. They feel that the other people they are speaking to are the same, in the same situation, in the same boat, as Kurt said. So it is very important because they become aware of their weaknesses and strength, and they start moving forward and improving their communicative competence. So this may be very helpful. All the work by Kurt may be very helpful to us to enhance this aspect. And we would like to create a group. If you're interested, you will find this group in the future weeks, I don't know, next week maybe. And we're going to share experiences and documents and ideas, opinions on this aspect, not only on TeCoLa, but on using foreign language learning, teaching in a pedagogical lingua franca perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, this pedagogical lingua franca perspective, I think, is kind of natural for you, because in eTwinning interactions, somehow students have to communicate, and they do it in the language they all share, right?
Yes. And maybe sometimes they're not so much aware.
Well, yeah. Yeah, well, I thank you very much for having been here, or being here, and your contributions. And there's still time for questions now, so we stay around. But for those who have to leave, I wanted to say thank you very much, and bye bye, tschüss, and hopefully see you around in the eTwinning group. So if there are any questions, please go ahead. But it's been a long session, almost 1.5 hours.
I said we have not established the name of the group yet. Maybe we could give the same name of this webinar session, so that they can easily detect.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. And those of you who want to know more about the environment, I saw a few questions here regarding what was it, tutorials. I mean, there are tutorials actually on the website, on our website, but if you are interested in all these things and would like to set things up, then just get in touch, and I can see what I can do. I will see what I can do.
Okay.
So, bye-bye again. We need more time. Yes. Yes, of course. I mean, it's always takes time to get acquainted and digest. And yes. Okay. My pleasure. My pleasure, and a big thank you to Alessandra for having organized this all and having created this wonderful opportunity. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye then.